Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 6 of the Pediatric Summit's 8-part webcast series. We have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Shawn Dill. Shawn Dill went to Logan College and graduated in 1995 and has been doing amazing things ever since. He practiced in Costa Rica for 8 years and law for chiropractic in Costa Rica, which is an amazing feat. I'm sure it took countless hours. Came back to the States, has been practicing. He runs the Specific Chiropractic Center. It's upper cervical chiropractic practices all across the United States. I believe there's 18 of them now, which is amazing. Dr. Dill is a great mentor to a ton of students and doctors. What makes him really special to me is there are a lot of chiropractors that are great at the philosophy of chiropractic or the science, or the research, neurology, the chiropractors who are good at the art, who are very, very great adjusters. And then you have the ones that are phenomenal at all three. And there are a ton of those around and are amazing. But then Dr. Dill takes it a step further and to me is one of the best communicators of chiropractic that there is right now, and one of the best business people, not just chiropractic business, but business in general. And what makes it different is a lot of people think they're good at business, but they don't do it in a congruent way. And Dr. Dill really inspires me by making that marketing and business congruent to how you want to practice and what is great for the profession. So today's webcast is called A Practice Full of Kids, Checking versus Adjusting. Like a lot of people on the surface are like, oh yeah, I know the difference. You check them and you adjust them, like easy. But there are a ton of facets that go in to make sure that you're doing it right, whether they even need to be adjusted. So we're going to dabble a little bit into that today, and Dr. Dill is the guy to talk about this. So Dr. Dill, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. Other than, I'm just noticing, this is my, we just got this new office, and so this is my first webcast here, and I'm noticing I'm kind of dark. The lighting is kind of screwy here. So I'll have to figure out something for future webcasts.
Cool. So how's your day been? It's early there. Was it 9 a.m. there?
Yeah, it's 9 a.m. but I've been up for a while. I actually just I did a Facebook Live for our group. We run a group that's called the Black Diamond Club. And so this morning I did a Facebook Live with them where we actually spoke about this concept that I talk about that's called "There is no glory in the grind." You know, we have all these people that, you know, you wake up in the morning in your Facebook feed and they say rise and grind, or you may probably as a student, you know, a lot of people run around school and it's time to grind. One of the things that's great about this thing that we do in chiropractic is that it's not a grind. You know, I absolutely love my life. I love what I do. And, you know, another thing is, you know, and we'll just might as well start you off on a little bit of a controversial foot here. I also am not in a trench. I don't know where chiropractors became, you know, so enamored with this idea of being in the trenches. If that's if that's a qualification to take advice from me, then I'm excluded. Because when you tell me that you are in a trench, I kind of think like, you know, digging a trench, like that doesn't sound very fun at all. When I go to work, it looks nothing like being in a trench and it looks nothing like grinding. So yeah, it's early, but we've been busy and it's been a lot of fun. This is, you know, now I get to do this with you.
Awesome. And I, as well as everybody else, is ecstatic that you're here with us. So let's talk a little bit about kids. Or not even just kids, because everyone needs to know this principle for whoever they see. So checking versus adjusting. Did you have any like opening statements or blanket statements you wanted to start off with
Sure.
that we could maybe go from?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, you know, one of my big concepts is called marketing to the 90, where I talk about the 90-10 rule. And, chiropractic, just in a nutshell, you can actually download a copy of a talk where I go more in depth on this on my website. If you go to www.drShawnDill.com, right there on the homepage, you could download this talk where we discuss this more in depth. But a 30,000-foot view of the concept is that chiropractic has only been seeing about 10% of the population, basically since its inception. And in all actuality, that number is high. That's inflated. It's not 1 out of every 10 people that you meet is an actual chiropractic patient. So that means that out of 10 people, if I use that number to be generous, 9 people, they're not chiropractic patients. And I think that oftentimes people think that those people are necessarily anti-chiropractic. That's not really the case either, in the sense that if we were to say, are they vitalistic? Of course they're vitalistic. Do they believe that the power that made the body heals the body? A lot of them do. Are they enamored with medicine and they think that they should take drugs for everything that goes wrong with them? Actually, in our healthcare system, that's one of the primary problems is people do not want to take drugs. They're trying to find solutions. So why do they not, access or utilize chiropractic more? Well, in large part, I believe it's because they chiropractic with some things that they think are slightly out of the box and they're afraid to label themselves. One of the biggest values for people is that they never want to be judged, and especially in that sense, they never want to feel like they're stupid. They don't want people to think that they're making poor decisions with their life. So when we market chiropractic as being anti-vaccine, pro-chemtrail, anti-GMO, anti-medicine, that scares a lot of people off. But one of the bigger issues is if we were to go back to those initial concepts and say the majority of people actually are vitalistic, understand that the nervous system runs and controls all of the functions of the body, do not want to necessarily take drugs, they also have a hard time with this concept of understanding that there can be interference with the nervous system. They would embrace that. But then the next step is, if you look at most chiropractic practices, it would seem from the practice as though most people are eternally subluxated. And that's when we have this disconnect. The concepts are great for 9 out of 10 people, but the practice is where we get, sort of off the rails. I will invite you to also consider this, that those 9 out of 10 people who are not utilizing chiropractic, they do get checked very frequently for things. They go for mammograms, pap smears, PSAs, yearly physicals. They do a lot of things with their health. Eye exams, teeth exams. They're constantly checking their health. And here's the big difference with the expectation. So they believe that checking with frequency is preventative, which it's actually not preventative, and we understand that. But they subscribe to the concept of being checked regularly. But when they get checked, they actually have the hope that they will be told that everything is fine. And so here's where we break down. If you believe that subluxation is detrimental to the well-being of your patients, and a patient comes in on Monday and they get adjusted, well, wouldn't it make sense, at least on the surface, that on Tuesday or Wednesday that they would not be subluxated? I mean, if adjustments only last an hour, then we're kind of engaged in an activity as a profession that's kind of a futile activity. Like, what would even be the point of me going to a chiropractor if I get adjusted and an hour later I'm subluxated? So the question really is, at what point do I become subluxated again? Now, philosophically, we should understand that, an adjustment with that extra something with staying put value, the idea behind the concept is to give one adjustment and have that person be clear for the rest of their lives. We've kind of lost that concept from a philosophical and an artistic construct in chiropractic. But to me, even more importantly, is from a business construct. This construct actually resonates more with that 90% than the 10%. People can understand that. If I were to say to the 90% of the individuals, would it make sense for you to get your nervous system checked? As much sense as it makes to check your teeth, get mammograms, pap smears, prostate exams, yearly physicals, does it make sense to get your nervous system checked? Of course, they say yes. They go to cardiologists, stress tests, all of that testing makes sense to them. But what doesn't make sense to them is every time I get a mammogram, there's something wrong. Every time I go to the dentist, I have a cavity. And what happens is every time they go to the chiropractor, they're subluxated. Couple this with the educational efforts of the chiropractor to tell people that subluxation is so detrimental, we really run into issues, because if it is really that detrimental and you as a chiropractor really can't seem to get rid of it, again, what's the point? And that's why they opt out. Now, if we translate this to children, this becomes even more important, because when parents have kids, they get their kids tested for everything under the sun. I have a friend that recently had a child, and now I'm finding out that they do genetic testing to look for like these obscure, genetic disorders that might, be in the genes. And I was even having a conversation. I was like, wow, like imagine this, like, 20 years ago, children might have had this obscure genetic disorder, but because they never diagnosed it, they never really did anything, or there wasn't any real difference in their lives. Maybe they didn't crawl at the right age, or they didn't sit up at the right time, but in the end everything got caught up and everything was fine. But now we're testing for all these things. So parents, they take their kids to the pediatrician. What does the pediatrician do? Like weighs them, measures them, looks at them, does a couple APGAR things, and says everything is fine. And what does the parent do? Well, they make another appointment to come back, and they pay. The idea is this, is that if you want to see more kids, I honestly feel like, and we'll expand this at the summit, I just honestly feel like we need to abandon the concept that all children are subluxated and really market the concept that all children need to be checked. And I'm telling you, the concept that all children need to have their nervous system checked will be embraced by the 90%. But in order to do this, we need to actually have the practice. Your practice needs to match that. Marketing becomes easier. Education becomes easier when you begin to market the concept of getting checked, and you move away from the concept of getting adjusted. Every parent believes that their child is perfect. Even if they think that there's issues, they think that that's the perfect creature. And what we're really promoting on the surface for chiropractors that want to see a lot of kids, what we're really promoting is that your child is actually not that perfect. And your child is not that perfect because your medical doctor screwed them up. Now, what parent wants to embrace that idea? Now, what we should say is that your child is perfect, but it would make sense just as much as we're tracking the weight and we're tracking the length and we're tracking the development. It would make sense that we would want to track the nervous system. Every parent can buy into that. I'm telling you, every parent can buy into that. If you want to see a lot of kids, check them for subluxation. And what that means is that, listen, sometimes children may come in your office and they might not need to be adjusted. Even from the get, not every child on the planet is subluxated. If you believe that, then your philosophy is flawed, right? Because if subluxations are as detrimental as we say they are, and every child on the planet is subluxated, then as a human race, we will be extinct very soon, right? It just doesn't make sense. Our job as chiropractors is to find those people who are subluxated and adjust them. But every man, woman, and child on the planet needs to be checked. Now, particularly here, if we want to see kids, how easy would it be to promote the idea that your kids need to be checked? I mean, even look at how chiropractors have found this little window of opportunity with going into the schools and checking kids for scoliosis, right? And that's the same idea. Not every kid has scoliosis, but every parent subscribes to the idea that they want to get their children checked for scoliosis at the hands of an expert. Well, imagine that we somehow got off this idea of crookedy spines and placed the emphasis on nervous system. And we were able to get the parents to understand that every child needs to be they need to be checked for scoliosis just as well, but they need to be checked even more importantly for nervous system issues. And not every kid has a nervous system issue, but if they do, don't you want to find that, detect that early, and begin the measures to correct that at an early age? Of course they're going to subscribe to this. Sometimes I sit back, Caleb, and I think this is just too easy. Like, what have we been doing as chiropractors, pounding into these parents' heads that their kids are messed up and trying to convince them of that, and then wondering why our offices are not flooded with kids?
Yeah, that's definitely food for thought. Like, I don't know. It makes sense to me, what you're talking about. I totally agree. I think everybody needs to hear that over and over.
Let me tell you too then, so as far as the Pediatric Summit is concerned, why this is so important, because, seeing your lineup, fantastic lineup, and there's going to be tons of great instruction and tools that are delivered. But as far as I am concerned, when I agreed to come out to talk to the group, I want to make sure that we can fill your office with children, with kids, so that you have a population to apply your wisdom and knowledge and your skill on. It is not enough. Listen, and I'm not knocking anybody, but I just don't want people running out there and just saying that, you have to see a lot of kids and, set your hair on fire and see a lot of kids, because I know a lot of people that have a passion for seeing kids, seeing a lot of children in their practice, and they just honestly have a hard time marketing that. And it is more difficult. I will admit that, because you have to market to the parents. The kids don't get to choose to come in. And you have to have a message that resonates with the parents, and that's what makes it more difficult. And if you don't have that right, then you're not going to have a practice full of kids, even if that's your passion. And so I really want to come out, to Pediatric Summit to really, lay out some principles and foundational building blocks to give, the participants some tools so that they can go home and begin to penetrate in their communities with a message that will resonate with the community and will open those doors, which will enable those parents to bring their children into the practice so that they can get checked. Now, from there, I really, I have a strong involvement with the art of the specific. I practice upper cervical at the specific chiropractic centers. That's all we do is upper cervical exclusively. We have a few of our doctors in the specific who have an emphasis on pediatrics, but at the same time, I really don't have a personal agenda as far as what technique or what methodology you use when checking your kids. There's so many amazing resources out there of people that have so much knowledge and can help you to, hone your skill and the art of checking and adjusting children. I really want to make sure that on this particular encounter that we give some great tools to help you to attract those children into your office. Because if we're not doing that, then all of those skills, all of that knowledge is for nothing.
For sure. You can be the best adjuster all day, but if there's nobody in your office, then,
Yes.
For sure. And everybody has been doing it, I feel like, the same way since 100 years ago. And that's why we are where we are, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And there's an interesting thing that's happening too, which I'll bring to light in September at the summit. But we seem to be blinded as chiropractors as well to this concept of the social shift that occurs. There's a great book that was written about this called Pendulum, where they talk about in 40-year increments. And the low end of the pendulum being in 2003, and it's very cyclical throughout history. They document how this has gone on very cyclically through history, which then would imply that we have another from 2003 to 2023. We have this shift, and the shift goes on one end of the spectrum from a very me-oriented society over into a very we-oriented society. And so we've come now from that midpoint, and we are now from 2003 moving now to the we-oriented society. And I tell people that's why, in current events, when you have shootings or you have things that happen, why you see like this movement of people to adopt the collective viewpoint. Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, it doesn't matter, these collectives. The Orlando shooting where people get behind it. Whereas, 20 years ago, you didn't see that type of thing happening as much because it was very me-oriented, right? And so that's why Facebook is so popular. And that's why it hasn't gone anywhere. Like, Facebook's going to go away. Well, you have to understand that Facebook came out in that shift, in that time period where we were moving into the collective, and that's why it has that strength. But here's what's really important, is most of the information that's out there, the practice management gurus, the people writing books and selling stuff to chiropractors as far as marketing is concerned, are preaching me tactics. Spinal screenings, sales strategies that speak to the one are no longer going to be as effective as strategies that build community, right? And so, listen, if you want to have a large pediatrics practice, you need to build a large pediatrics community. Right? It's no longer about going out and one person at a time. That was great in the me-oriented society. In the we-oriented society, we need to be about the collective. We need to understand that we need to speak into large groups, and people will move based off of the collective. For example, we just saw it in England. You had the Brexit effort, because the collective rises up and they want their voice to be heard. I get really worried because I see a lot of our leaders in chiropractic do not understand this. And they're teaching your generation, Caleb, how to market and speak and communicate into a very me-oriented society, because that's what worked for them. Back in the Mercedes 80s, it was the me society that moved from that height, and then it moved over to the collective. I think if you watch the utilization and popularity of chiropractic from that Mercedes 80s to 2003, you're seeing our popularity and utilization dwindle in response to our inability to adapt to the changing movement in society. And so, that's the other element that we really need to emphasize. Come September, I want to give you some strategies that will definitely feel outside of the box. But I'm telling you, 10 years from now, everybody that is successful will be doing those things. And, we're at that, from 2003, we're in that period of change. And if we don't get this right, well, then chiropractic as a whole is going to suffer greatly. We're going to speak specifically into the pediatrics world, but, I think that all of these things apply regardless. Whatever population that you want to see, you have to understand the way that society thinks and understand these trends even, because, spinal screenings where it's a one-on-one encounter, like we're having, you're on my screen, this is a one-on-one encounter. So I could convince you, but the reason why you're doing this in a webcast format is because the collective likes to view these things and work and operate as a group. That's the preferred methodology. But if we're not marketing in this way, so how many chiropractors are marketing? One of the things that we do at the Specific Chiropractic Center is every month we have a Google Hangout that our patients around the country can access and interface with our doctors. And every month there's 2 different doctors that are on there. And people have asked me, like, well, how does that work? Well, it works great because it's not about an individual relationship anymore. The values, societal values, are shifting more to collective relationships. What are we doing as a group? What are we doing together? And so a really smart strategy would begin to educate or empower your communities to understand that collectively we are just getting our children's nervous systems checked because it's just collectively the smart thing to do. There's no judgment. We're not being ridiculed. We're not being chastised. It's just that's what we do. And if you start to take note, that is what you're beginning to see. You see these protests around our country because it's just what we do. People are beginning to take a vested interest in the collective while they personally were not necessarily wronged. They want to promote the collective idea. Man, in chiropractic, we would be really smart to begin to plant these seeds that the collective idea is to get your nervous system checked, and then you get adjusted whenever it's necessary. Medicine has done a great job of this. The collective idea is that you get your mammogram, your pap smear. Dentists have done a great job of this because the collective idea is that you get your teeth checked every 6 months. Chiropractors have done a terrible job of this because our leadership, our gurus are still teaching us about the individualistic cell. And we need to begin to understand the collective cell, the ability to control the subconscious thought process of a group, of a collective, of a community. That's where the real value is going to be. And listen, it's going to be that way, actually, because from 2003, we have a 20-year cycle till we hit 2023, and then we have a 20-year cycle back. So, I mean, this idea of community and the collective consciousness is going to reign, Caleb, for your practice career. But that also means that that previous side on that pendulum, everything that was on the other side, the 40-year period on the other side of 2003, that no longer applies. And so, you and your generation, you guys have to be very careful about what you're learning and where you're learning it from. Because if you're not learning it from people who are up to date on the current consciousness, those marketing strategies are not going to work. And believe me, I see that all the time in the people that I work with and the people I consult with, utilizing old marketing strategies and getting really frustrated about the lack of results that they're seeing. And they just don't understand that marketing strategy was great, but 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And that's when those gurus who are preaching it, that's when they built their practices. That's when they built their wealth. And so, yeah, it was very effective. And they do have the knowledge, but they're teaching you knowledge that was geared at a me-oriented society and not a we-oriented society. Last thing on that, I want to say that as the society moves into a we-oriented consciousness, this idea of marketing, the idea of having your children checked for subluxation actually becomes easier. Because once some people are doing it, other people in the collective are looking around and saying, what are you doing? Well, I had an appointment with Dr. Scroggin, and I had to have my children checked. Well, what's that about? And their willingness to adhere or to incorporate what their friends and colleagues, what their community is doing, is heightened because of the societal consciousness, because you begin to see people start to do things simply because that's what everybody else was doing. Where in an individualistic society, people don't care what everybody else is doing. They just do things that are best for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. Make sure I'm on the right. Okay, you can see me. So one thing you said that really resonated, the inability to adapt. That there's a question that's the answer to. And well, there's many. That's not what we're going to be talking about. That's not what we talked about here today. But just think about that. The inability to adapt. If that's what you're trying to affect every day in your practice, think about it in every aspect of your life. So, Dr. Shawn, thank you so much. I learned a ton just then, and I've been following you for years. Do you have anything else you would like to close with, or anything else you'd like to say to the audience?
This particular audience that's watching, you're watching because of your existing relationship with Caleb and the Pediatric Summit. If you're not yet registered, I just want to encourage people to get on that. This is not something. Chiropractors also, when we talk about the principle of time and the ability to adapt, you need to take a step first. I've never seen a patient get well sitting on their couch, just making phone calls or buying stuff off of late night infomercials. I've never seen a chiropractor turn the practice around watching a webinar, right? You have to actually get up in order to get out. And if your practice is not exactly where you want it to be in regards to your know-how, skill, wisdom, or business in seeing children, then I want to encourage you to get on this now. Like, there's no better time. Later will be too late. Just right now, go to the website that Caleb provides you and just get registered. I understand space is limited, but we'll figure it out. We'll get you in. She has a heart of service, and we want to get this message out to everybody that needs to hear it. So, Caleb, what should they do?
They should go to thepediatricsummit.com. It's registered. We've already had a ton of ticket sales, but if you're listening to this as soon as we send it out, this Friday, July 16th, is the last day for the early bird. It goes up this weekend. So if you're a procrastinator, this is, I think, the second time that we've raised the price. We just want people to get their tickets early. But beyond that, thank you so much, Dr. Shawn. I really appreciate you. I'm sure everybody appreciates you that is on here. And I can't wait to see what you have to say come October 7th and 8th at the Pediatric Summit. It's an event. And for those of you that are waiting for the next webinar or webcast, we have Dr. Steve Tullius, who is amazing, sees tons of children in his office. Dr. Shawn and Dr. Tullius are both the IFCO. I think that says something about them and how they want to see our profession. Yes, and especially from these marketing and practice building efforts, how to change our thinking, how to adapt. I really think that we're going to see a big growth in the people who attend this seminar. And for me personally, I love everything about chiropractic, love everything about seeing children, and I hope that you guys too, and I hope you guys step up, like Dr. Shawn said. A lot of Gary Vaynerchuk videos and reading his books lately. If you don't know who he is, look him up. He's great. But one of his things is he puts out a ton of content for marketing, and he's all about Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter and everything. But he does a lot of keynote speeches, and people ask him questions, and people watch his videos. And in his videos, how many videos are you going to watch? Get out there, do it. Like you can't be a student the rest of your life. So just like Dr. Shawn was saying, you got to get out, try something, do it, take action. Thank you so much, Dr. Shawn. I will see you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Caleb.
All right. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.